Hello, my name is Brett Crane, and this is my Technology Use Plan presentation for Boise State University's EDTECH 501. One of the first things we have to ask ourselves is why develop a technology use plan? Well, with the current speed at which technology tools change and new technology tools appear on the educational scene, it's important to have a technology use plan in place for a variety of reasons. Some of these reasons are, Firstly, schools and districts need to know how to evaluate technologies to see how and what they will spend dwindling resources on and how to prioritize those technologies. Now, teachers also need to know what they should be focusing on for their own understanding of technology and how best to utilize what is available for them. Teachers also need to have a uniform understanding of what elements need to be taught to students at what grade level, so that the expectations for each grade level are met as those students move on. Also, all stakeholders need to have, within that learning community, need to have a shared vision of how they want the technology utilized in their schools and how students will benefit from those technology tools and resources that are made available. Our next question is, who should be a part of this planning process for a technology use plan? Well, we'd like to start with the students themselves and their parents and try to meet their needs. And then we have teachers also that would be a part of this whole process, administrators, and then we go into other people such as technology support staff, which could also lead, depending on the type of things we're trying to do in a technology use plan, could be other support staff, whether it be transportation, facilities, food services, and various things like this. This can also lead us to other people that could be part of our tech use plan. Could be partnership with businesses and technology businesses to help innovate and employ various new technologies within the school and in the infrastructure. But this could also mean other people, such as people on the school board, other community people, and quite frankly, a lot of people that get involved in their desires for what the school should be like. Now, as you can see, this gets a little crowded, and there's two inherent problems with this. One is just the sake of size and all the different opinions and the needs that people have and how they want those met can sometimes be problematic with a large school district. The other problem is, as I started out with the students and parents, oftentimes this is the antithesis of how a tech use plan usually begins. Oftentimes it starts with the administrators deciding what they would like to do, pushing that new agenda to the teachers, and then the teachers informing the students and parents of how this technology plan will work. With that being said, it's important to recognize that the primary stakeholders are indispensable in developing a technology use plan, of course, depending on the planning area that you're currently working on, depending on the expertise needed. But those primary stakeholders being the students you're there to serve, their parents, the teachers, and administrators. And also, depending on what you're trying to accomplish with your technology use plan, secondary stakeholders such as technology support, teachers' aides in the school, other support staff within the school or the district, or even, as I mentioned in the previous slide, technology business partners that could help with implementing some of the goals that you have for your technology use plan. Now, let me reiterate that there is a distinct importance and a need to move to smaller educational community groupings where decisions and the cost of decisions, whether that's fiscally or adaptability, is more manageable. It is fine for a larger school district to use similar solutions, but they should really match and mold to the communities they serve, those small communities. Now, as we move to these smaller community groups with the autonomy to make decisions, we will see real identities form that may be modeled by other educational community groups. The next topic is our process description, and this comes in 3 steps. Now, step 1 is really to identify our needs and what we're trying to do. Now, this is going to be achieved by 1, standardized testing, evaluation that we normally do to see where our needs are being met or not being met within the school. But it'll also come from parent and student input to see what they need and what they see for a vision for a technology use plan. And of course also teacher input and what they think they are able to do and have a vision for. Now, one of the big questions we need to ask ourselves is, when making a technology use plan, is how expansive that tech plan should be. Now, whether it should be school-centered, whether it should be community-centered, or whether it should be globally centered. And what I mean by this is, for some schools' needs, they might be more geared towards just perhaps software or hardware within the school to help them address specific needs for their student body that can be addressed just by in-house tools. But we move all the way to globally centered with the idea of really using technology, the internet, connectivity at its most to be able to have students identify with community outside the school and be able to interact with community outside the school. But that also largely depends on how much we as a school or a district are willing to let students and also parents let students interact with the world at large through the internet, and that's a decision that has to be made when you're trying to formulate a technology use plan. Once the needs and goals are identified, educational professionals need to determine the best way to achieve these goals. A few of the questions that really need to be answered, some of the big questions really in trying to solve these problems and meet these needs are: number 1, do we really need the implementation of a new technology to meet the particular need we're trying to solve? Or do we actually already have the technology we needed or the staff available that can deal with that problem just in a new way without having to spend the resources just for something new and neat? Number 2, are teachers we currently have willing to adapt their teaching style to the vision and goals of our technology use plan? In the implementation of technology and new technology, do we have a shared vision that that's what the teachers are trying to do? Number 3, when we adopt specific technologies, should they be integrated at an individual level, a school level, or at a district level? It has been my experience that quite often new technologies, whether it's software or hardware, are usually implemented at a district level and just disseminated, I should say, at a district level, because it's cheaper to buy, of course, in mass for what you're trying to do, but when in reality you might not be saving any money because only a few teachers are actually utilizing that technology. So that's a question we need to ask, is when we are implementing something, does it need to go to just a few teachers? within a building, or does it need to go to a wide range of teachers, or is it a technology that all teachers need access to? The fourth question, what are the technology-specific skills and goals for each grade level? And figuring that out. What technology skills should students be proficient in as they move through the different grade levels? Number 5, should technology education for students be separate instruction, or should it be fully integrated into each and every teacher's curriculum? Again, it's been my experience that instructional technology for students usually happens as a side class with some instruction coming from the general ed teachers, but quite often there's a discrepancy between different teachers on how much they use technology in the classroom. Of course, I think the better approach would be to have it fully integrated within the curriculum, and that all teachers are maximizing that potential using technology. But that's not always the case. So it has to be asked, how do you want to make sure that students are gaining that instruction? Number 6, how will we evaluate teacher mastery of technology use, and how will we also, more importantly, provide training to improve that, so they can also buy into that integration of technology, not only for their students but for themselves, and to utilize that in their lives and have it become a part of what they want to do. And number 7, does our staff development model match our technology use plan and vision? In other words, do we practice what we preach? I've often found that we have high ideals for how we want to teach our students, and we do lots of great things to teach our students, but that staff development, professional development, oftentimes falls far short in the ideals that we think are essential for students. We don't do them for staff. So if we're going to use high levels of technology in our technology use plan for teaching students, we should also think about using those same benchmarks for teaching staff. And then finally, 8, how do we measure student mastery for technology use, and how do we use that information for their advancement? This brings us to step 3, implementation. Now, once goals are established and technology use is prioritized according to needs, administration works with teachers to provide the most cost-effective tools and resources, and to implement that technology in a manner that is timely and efficient. So what we're really talking about here is administration managing the heavy lifting in regards to, well, judging and applying affordability, being supportive to adapting to new ideas and technology use as new educational opportunities arrive, and of course the effective management of resources to facilitate the students' needs and the teacher's goals to meet those needs. This moves us on to my vision statement for a technology use plan, which would be utilizing technology to bridge the connections between education and the rest of the community and the world in order to prepare students for future learning. The accessibility and connectivity with others is really the key to advancing and changing the way education has been conducted since before the Industrial Revolution. And it's my feeling that really it's making those connections and giving students and affording students the access to make those connections, which is vitally important for change. Next, this brings us to our objectives and timelines. Now, this is quite frankly a pretty simplistic timeline, But and I've already discussed quite a few of the objectives, which I think are important. But I think it's important to say that we need to have two things really. We need to have at least some type of long-term goal, which we would start with, say 5 years, which gives us some overall vision, objectives that we're trying to meet. But what's really important then is to have short-term goals, 1 year, 2 years out, in which we can try to achieve really attainable goals and be able to have these short goals in order to keep up with the rapid change of technology. Then so I have a planning phase and then move on to actually the beginning of our, let's say, for example, a 2-year goal, short-term goal. Then be sure to review that short-term goal and then to see if you've met your needs close to the end of that 2-year, 1 year or 2-year period. Then begin a new cycle. Readjust, set new goals, and move on to a new cycle. As you move on, when you get to about 4 years, let's say, then start reevaluating those long-term visions and objectives to see how technology has changed and what you think your goals should be for the future, and either stick with your current objectives or perhaps review them, rewrite them, and get them ready for a new cycle for another 5-year period. And this goes on with your short-term goals. They keep cycling with another review period where you start looking at what needs to happen and what needs to change. And then you begin that new either 5-year, both the 5-year long-term vision as you set up the changes that you made there, and then again begin your short-term goals that are attainable and something you're able to continue on with. As you then move on to then review those short-term goals again and again in that same repeating cycle, so that you can continue to adapt and adjust to technology as it moves on and as new technologies emerge. So I guess the important thing that I'm trying to stress for meeting your objectives and formulating some type of timeline is have an overarching long-term goal, for one, to give yourself a vision. Stay flexible to the needs and changes in technology, the needs that you will need to meet with your school and with your students, and emerging technologies, which you may have no idea of the type of things that could be coming up. Then set achievable short-term goals so you can see progress, having something that you can measure and look to and see how it worked. And then, of course, always stay consistent with your vision. Always try to match up with what your school vision is to see if you're on track and on target. Now this brings us to our needs assessment. Now, before I start with this, remember that your needs assessment should be really part of your planning, a continued part of your planning and goal setting, and not something that's just kind of tacked on after all the work is done. Okay, that being said, your needs assessment has a few questions that need to be asked that have come up in previous things that I've mentioned. For example, does the school have the right staff to match your school vision, for one? Is professional development meeting the needs for training and matching your school vision? Is there adequate technology support for infrastructure and timely support for software and hardware concerns? Is administration acting in a fair, reasonable, and timely manner in notification and implementation of technology set forth in your yearly goals? And then, is the model of the school configuration and support actually promoting student learning and the environment that you're trying to create as intended? I guess, is it really working? If it's not, go back and change it. Set new goals, set new visions. This brings us to our last point, staff development. Now, I've already mentioned some of my concerns for staff development, and I'll just kind of reiterate some of those here. One of the important things is, in any situation for a technology use plan and in that staff development, is to be receptive to the teacher's needs. Now, that could be needs according to what they would like to learn, what staff feels is important for the technologies they would like to utilize in their classroom, or it could be in how that learning is delivered. Next point, as I've mentioned earlier, is modeling staff development after your own technology use plan and vision. If it's what you think is best for your students, it's probably also good for you too. And so you should match your ideals with what you do for staff development in the best ways to educate, regardless of whether that's a student or whether that's staff. And then finally, something that I think is really important, and I think the frustration of much staff development for many teachers is not seeing how it benefits them in many ways for the future, whether that's an advancement for their career or whatever the case is finding ways to reward excellence and excellence in teaching, so you get the right teachers with the right vision in the school accomplishing what you want, which is excellence for education and excellence for student performance. Thank you for listening. This is my presentation.